next speaker, but Josh had a flat tire, and we knew him. This is earlier today, and his car was towed, and apparently he's not going to be able to be here today. So we're going to move on. Introducing the next speaker is someone I know really well. It's my wife Julianne, the love of my life. She's president of the Georgia Republican Assembly's group. She started a new organization she might or may not tell you about. And she's also co-chair of the Atlanta Tea Party. Ladies and gentlemen, Julianne Thompson.
Oh, thank you, Kenny Loggins. Okay, it is, I will make this brief. You know, we had dinner with my church last night, and I was so excited after our conversation about Scotland and William Wallace and Robert the Bruce that I was going to stand up here and I was going to give you a big freedom speech. But I've decided that I'm going to keep it brief because we're at the end of the day. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. A year and a half ago, I was one of those people that was afraid of an Article 5 convention. And I was terrified, actually. And it was someone from the Compact for America named Kevin Gutzman that spoke at the event that Jason produced last year. How many of you were at that event when Kevin spoke? Well, I know most of you were there because a lot of people I see in this room I know were there last year. But Kevin is the person that sat down with me and alleviated my fears about an Article 5 convention. And Kevin has just been an inspiration to me, as has Nick Dronius and Chip DeMoss, and our next speaker is from Compact for America. And they're doing just a fantastic job with their bills that are going across the country, including the one here in Georgia, which is a Compact for a Balanced Budget Amendment. Our speaker is Dr. Byron Schlomach. He is a graduate of Texas A&M, so he's an Aggie. And he's well known in the state of Texas for his work in the Texas transparency laws. He has a PhD in economics, and he is an advisor for the Compact for America, and he also works for the Goldwater Institute. So please welcome Dr. Byron Schlomach.
All right, well, during the long day, various thoughts passed through my mind, both relevant and random. The one thing that passed through my mind was a line from an old movie called Stripes, where Bill Murray is urging his compatriots to get with it and practice for the next day's graduation. And he says at one point, Americans are descended from people who've been kicked out of every other decent country in the world. Well, when I was still in Texas, and I live in Arizona now, but when I was still in Texas, I was looking through a list of the governors of Texas. It's amazing to see how many governors early on in the state's history came from Georgia. William Travis, the commander of the Alamo, was from Georgia originally. So, you know, I think Texans are descended from people who've been kicked out of every other decent state in the nation. So, the point of my talk today is how do we get control of Congress? How do we get control of the federal government? And I think the main thing that we have to get control of is the federal government's spending. It is the federal government's ability to spend and often to extort states to implement certain policies because of the money that it can spend, that it creates far too much power for the federal government and that limits our freedoms and our liberties. Now we have an approach to the Article 5 effort that has a number of supporters, 5 congressmen, 2 from Texas, 2 from Arizona, Senator from Utah, Mike Lee. The Cato Institute is a supporter. 9 state think tanks are supporters including the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. Judge Andrew Napolitano with Fox News is a supporter, and so is my church, for that matter. But the main thing that we have to get control of is our spending and our debt, and the way to do that is through the balanced budget amendment. And we have a unique approach to a balanced budget amendment. You can go on to the next slide. Just very quickly, you can see where the debt is headed. This shows where the debt is estimated to be by 2020, something like over $20 trillion. Go to the next slide. Now, we all know, of course, that that previous slide was in nominal terms, not in real terms. This is debt relative to our GDP. You can see that the debt relative to our GDP never exceeded really 30% until you get to the Great Depression and then World War II. World War II, we got up to about 125% of GDP. That was the debt. Now, right after World War II, and one of the reasons the U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency is because we paid that off. But something was very different at that time in this country. The main thing was that every other industrialized country in the world had been basically destroyed. We were the last man standing. We were practically a monopoly in the world economy. It makes it relatively easy to pay off a lot of debt during that period of time. Now, we're at a level of debt that is above 100% of GDP, and we don't have any prospects of being the world's monopolist in order to pay it off. We're in a terrible state. Not only that, World War II was a good investment. We defeated Hitler. We defeated fascist Japan. You could argue that some of the run-up in the debt during the 1980s was worthwhile. After all, we finally defeated communism. But what are we running up the debt for today? Mainly for programs that just make people dependent. We're not getting anything from it. You can go to the next slide. You can see it's a bipartisan issue. It doesn't matter who's president. It doesn't matter what their party is. They spend, spend, spend. Next one. And the thing is, we're headed for a default. And do we really want to be Argentina, where we have creditors looking to repossess the presidential yacht? Do we want to have a fire sale of Western lands? Now that I live in Arizona, I kind of care whether or not we have a fire sale of Western lands to China in order to help pay off our debt. Or are we just going to default? And if we do default, what are our creditors going to try to get from us? How are we going to defend ourselves if we can't pay for a military? Because we're so far into debt. Next slide. The problem is that congressmen can spend, go into more and more debt because they're buying our votes with our grandchildren's, our great-grandchildren's, our great-great-grandchildren's money. It's taxation without representation, this debt. Because at some point, somebody's going to have to pay for something. And who's going to be it? Future generations. Next slide. Well, we have an idea for a balanced budget amendment. This is a facsimile of it. I have copies of it up here if you want to see it, with some short explanations. We distributed some to the tables. But basically what it does is it says, one, you're going to balance the budget on a cash basis, non-gameable basis. Second, okay, you can borrow some, Congress, but your debt limit is 105% of the debt the day this amendment passes the states. 105%. So you'll have maybe 2 years to get your fiscal house in order and stop running up even more debt, more deficits. Now, if there's good reason why you need even more debt, the states are the ones that are going to give you permission to go into more debt. It's going to take at least 26 states to approve any proposal to increase the debt beyond that 105% limit. If you get close to that limit, the president has the job of impounding spending in order to not exceed the limit. And if his impoundments do not meet the approval of Congress, Congress can change it. And he can be impeached if he doesn't exercise the impoundment authority. Now, a lot of people say, well, they're just going to raise taxes in order to balance the budget. Well, number one, debt is taxes. It's just an issue of whether we pay the taxes or our great-great-grandchildren pay the taxes. Now, who's right? How is it right for our future generations to pay the taxes? So yeah, if they raise taxes, we're going to have to deal with it. I think government would be smaller today if we had to pay the taxes to support it. So that in and of itself is not something that bothers me. But nevertheless, this amendment includes a 2/3 requirement for Congress to raise taxes, except in certain circumstances, such as changing to a pure national sales tax, a fair tax type system, or closing loopholes. Then there's some definitions. You can go on to the next one. I think I pretty well explained that. You can go on to the next one. Now, the question is, will 2/3 of Congress ever vote for an amendment like this to limit itself and send it to the states? Never. Never will they do it. That's why, next one, under Article 5, there are two ways to get an amendment to the states. One is Congress, which is the way it's always been done, sometimes under threat of a state convention system. The other is for 2/3 of the legislatures of the states to call for a convention, which obligates Congress to call the convention, and then once the convention puts out its amendments, the states, it takes 3/4 of them, 38 states, to ratify that amendment, any amendments that are proposed. Now what that means is it's, as usual, very difficult to change the Constitution. Next slide, please. The only thing is, it's so difficult it's almost impossible. That shows what you call a Rube Goldberg machine, a machine that probably doesn't really work and never will because it's so complex. Well, that's kind of what it is when the states propose having a constitutional convention. You have to have at least 34 states apply for a convention, then you have to have the Congress call the convention, then you have to have at least 26 states. It's arguable whether or not it takes 34 or just a majority of the states to actually go into convention. But they have to, each state, name delegates, agree on rules and procedure and everything else for the convention. And then you have to have a congressional referral of the new proposed amendments to the states, and then have 38 states approve it. That's very, very difficult to do. Not that I don't support it, for especially the amendments that are being proposed by the Convention of the States, but it's very difficult. Next slide, please. Oh, and it takes forever. I mean, in one case, the last amendment, the 27th Amendment to the Constitution, took 200 years. It was one of the original Bill of Rights, by the way. I personally know the guy that got that done. He's in Texas. He works for the legislature. But he was doing a class project and got a C on the paper that said that you could pass this amendment. Made him mad, so he went out and did it. Anyway, next one. What we propose is using a compact, a state compact. There are more than 200 state compacts already in existence. They do things, they can contractually determine things like state lines, or in the case of Arizona, our share of the Colorado River water. They're for all kinds of purposes. They're explicitly allowed under the U.S. Constitution. What it would do is allow 38 states each to pass a compact, the same compact, same wording, it's a contract. They're all agreeing to the same contract. So 38 states would pass the compact. Congress would pass a single congressional resolution. The compact and the resolution have conditional enactments in both of them. Initially, passage of the compact, once 2 states pass the compact, a commission would be formed. that would promote the compact to at least 36 other states and do some administrative things, including sending the application to Congress from the 38th state, not the 34th, which is really all that's needed to call for a convention. But when the 38th state ratifies or approves of this compact, the application will be sent to Congress. The resolution, if it passes then or if it passes now, would be activated to automatically send a call for the convention. The compact has language in it already that appoints delegates. It would be the governor of the state. States could choose somebody else, but each state only gets one vote. The delegates would be sent to Dallas on a specific date, Dallas, Texas, in order to meet for one day to approve that balanced budget amendment. And then the convention rules are already specified in the compact. It's specified in the compact that you can't go rogue, basically. Delegates are automatically recalled if they try to do anything besides the balanced budget. And of course, legislatures can recall them at any time that they want to. Once the convention meets and it sends the amendment to the Congress automatically, ratification is referred, and ratification has already occurred because 38 states have already agreed to it. This makes it possible to amend the Constitution in maybe a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, because mainly it's dependent on how many states approve the compact. Right now, there is HB 794 sitting in the Rules Committee in the Georgia legislature. It is the compact. It is a bill to approve the compact. Among the sponsors is Josh Clark, the representative of Beaufort, Georgia, and it's a way. It just needs someone to push it out of rules and get it into the House. Apparently, the Senate has already shown a willingness to pass a constitutional convention law. Next slide, please. That's some of what I think I've already said about compacts and such. Next one, please. And this is simply reiterating the fact that this is a relatively simple way of getting this done. It still has all of the protections that Article 5 provides for making it difficult to amend the Constitution. 38 states have to agree, and they're all the built-in protections within the compact itself. Next slide, please. All the logistics are determined, all the purpose of the convention and everything determined. Next slide, please. And this is just basically a list of all the things that keep the convention from going out of control. Now, I know that there are people, for example, the Eagle Forum opposes this, the Eagle Forum, as well as the Convention of the States. So does the John Birch Society. This was actually drafted by Nick Dronius and others in response to issues brought up by Phyllis Schlafly's son, Andy Schlafly. And it addresses all of his objections. It's just that once all the objections were addressed, we never heard from him again. I don't know why. That'd be for him to answer. But the fact is, outside of outright armed conflict, which I think we're coming to if we don't do something, this is as secure as you can get to protect the current Constitution. Next slide, please. There you go. We've wrapped this process in bubble wrap. So, I don't know. Outside of encasing him in a M1 Abrams tank, I don't know what else to do. The next slide, please. Now, one of the things that's constantly brought up is, well, the convention in Philadelphia was a runaway convention. That wasn't ever intended. Not true. It's just not historically accurate to say that. This is some of the wording that came from the different states that called for the convention in Philadelphia. They wanted a firm national government. They wanted to render the federal Constitution adequate for the preservation of the Union. The fact is that our